coming here for maybe the last moon stream of this cycle, 3:10 a.m. and I'm wide awake. I slept all day today and watched science and plasma stuff all afternoon. So I'm ready to go just with our gorgeous 30% waning crescent moon here, just coming up for me in the east. Hope everybody's doing well. Let's get some tunes going, some vibes. Encoded overloading. Overloaded. Let me chill on this for a second. There we go. Yeah, so we definitely got some nice earth shine tonight. I haven't shown it yet, but we'll go to it. Gosh, and I listened to so many different shows today. Found an interesting channel. Wal Thornhill's Thunderbolts Project video today was amazing. Today, I had some really good vibes on the Electric Universe stuff on YouTube. There's just a ton more than there ever has been before. So many people are talking about it. It's one of those days where you're like, damn, there actually are people questioning things in the right way and talking about plasma and different ways forward. So the channel is the Demystify Sci podcast. If you just look up Wallace Thornhill or Wal Thornhill, you'll find it. But I'm going to link to it in the comment afterwards. I see Genghis Khan in the chat. He just got up from a nap. That's awesome. All right, so let's go for a little bit, maybe an hour show tonight, this morning, Saturday night into Sunday morning. I always like to say that. I don't know if anybody remembers the John Digweed show from the early 2000s, Saturday night into Sunday morning. Anyway, here we go with a little bit of jams. This is called Circuit Broken. So yeah, so I'm just going to talk as if everyone's here, but I know it's late and it's also like early at the same time. Not sure how many people show up, but today's show is called Everything is Plasma, just continuing on with the series. I think this will be it, kind of, and then I'm going to start working on this documentary. So I've started to put together some of these ideas on slides and also started to work on organizing all the different people in the space. And that's sort of where I got to today, where I went through all the Thunderbolts Project channel stuff and kind of listed out all the different individuals who spoke at the conferences and their topics. And then I went back and did a historical run using some of the stuff that Alexander Unziker is talking about and Ken Wheeler's references, and of course the stuff that I know. I also started putting together a YouTube channel compendium of the people who have shows that talk about electric universe and plasma cosmology. That's where I stumbled across this Demystify Science podcast, and they've done a ton of interviews with all the Thunderbolts Project people. It's very cool. But then I also kind of rediscovered Nassim Haramein. I don't know if anyone's checked him out, but I saw Nassim Haramein back when Thrive was a big thing, I think about 10 or 12 years ago, the Thrive documentary. And so it was fascinating to kind of see him starting this Resonance Institute, talking about a similar type of stuff that I've been talking about. I think I probably took a lot from Thrive at the time, and I hadn't really seen that Nassim had really followed through with creating an entire university online. It's really fascinating. So I'm going to try and link to all these different sites and different projects from all the different people. I'm trying to figure out the best way to do it, because I'd like to do it as a slideshow and a Google Doc so people can actually access it, and also as kind of a video where I can talk about it and go through each slide. So one of these coming months soon, I'll bring up all the slides and we talk about each one and what they offer and how they can kind of overlap. Interestingly, so I mentioned, so Wal Thornhill tonight put out the video about the update on the James Webb Telescope photos and how there's just braided filaments everywhere in all these pictures, especially the ones that are updated from Hubble, the ones that are much sharper. You can really see the filamentary action in space, and there's just undeniable at this point. What else was I thinking about? So I really liked it. It was very concise. It felt like going back to the old Thunderbolts Project videos. I also wanted to mention, I know the other night I found myself a little bit down on the Thunderbolts Project channel, but I realized that like Buddy's videos are doing great, Mel Atchison's stuff is excellent, so they have been putting out a lot of really quality content recently. I feel like just maybe not as frequently as we'd like, but more so, the crossover is actually starting to happen, where I'm starting to see, like this Demystify Science podcast is a very small channel, but they've already had people like Michael Claridge and Wal Thornhill on and Pierre-Marie Robitaille. Of course, the production quality is kind of moving through, but they are talking about some really interesting ideas. And when I say that, I know it sounds vague, but it's, they've covered a lot of different things, and I just found their channel today, so I'm still digging in to see what their viewpoint is. But they did do an interview with Pierre-Marie Robitaille, Sky Scholar, and they also did an interview with Stephen Crothers. And I feel like hopefully they'll redo those without the 3D characters, which is cute, but I feel like Pierre and Stephen deserve a face-to-face interview. So that channel's really interesting, and then Nassim Haramein's work is actually super fascinating as well, because I saw some of the people that he's doing live streams with, and I saw one of these guys talk about the sonoluminescent holographic or what is it, the holographic sonoluminescent. Was that what he was talking about? But yeah, really this idea of sound in the ether creating pretty much everything we see and how we see it, and he does some really interesting talks. So I want to link to that channel as well. I'm sure it's kind of a double-edged sword, because somehow, because I switch off YouTube from time to time, I kind of miss out on some of these things where, you know, a year passes and a lot of people actually have done videos that I've kind of wanted to see. So it's great to see the community expanding. The debunkers are losing their minds because there's really not much left that they can there's nothing to debunk in the first place, but all these channels that doubt the electric nature of the universe just, I find, you know, on one hand infuriating, on the other hand very silly, because just this idea of like doing science to denounce people and to character assassinate versus doing science to figure out new concepts. So yeah, today it was very inspiring to see the expansion of Electric Universe on YouTube and the discussion and the crossover. Again, people like Dyslexic Artist commenting on Alexander Unziker's videos, and then I watched Dissident Science, and I saw comments from Shockwave, and of course, you know, Shockwave from Electric View. And as I'm scrolling through Electric Scarification on the Moon on Thunderbolts Project, I see NGC's comments. So it's actually pretty great. Yeah, so I'll talk more about that. Let's get a jam in here. Jam sandwich. Climb to original source. Only one walls of our place. Down from the rockets below. Oh no, it's one love and disclose. Like the witches of the forest. Like a new ones. Cause you bring me, yes, and take me home. But I need my soul. Time never break me. Nothing can sink me home. Alright, so checking out some Earth shine, dark side of the moon right here. It's still a little bit hazy as it's rising, so it's not as clear, but I'm going to let it sit for a bit until we get some clarity. Got some beautiful Terminator line action. I'm not exactly sure what all those craters are right now, but we'll zoom in a little bit. Definitely beautiful to see that kind of the rest of the moon behind the shadow. So yeah, what else? I got this new hand controller, but my tracking still sucks. At least it's not giving me an error tonight. And I also cleaned the 11-inch mirror, and I think it's looking rather wonderful. It's good. I took some time to actually look into a bunch of telescope stuff as well. And I started to realize, like, again, not just Electric Universe stuff, but that lots of people are using telescopes now. There's much more footage and many more astronomy channels, I guess stuff that I'd never really seen before, where people have 14-inch scopes and people are building these 17-inch, 22-inch scopes. It's really great. Is it 20, 21, 22? But anyway, PlaneWave, this company, is building these absolutely amazing looking machines, and they're in the 20 grand range, but it would be nice to own that one day. I think the biggest part of having one of these huge scopes is getting a plot of land or a yard where you can really set it up properly. It's really not meant for urban viewing. But it was definitely getting me hyped on potentially getting a large scope and seeing even more detail. So what other things haven't I mentioned? I realized today I very rarely mention Anthony Peratt. Anthony Peratt is amazing in terms of plasma, in terms of understanding more of the structure of the universe. Hannes Alfvén, who also really the father of plasma, one of the main proponents of the plasma cosmology, and who else? Who else have I been missing? Channels, I guess I very rarely mention Greg J. Greg J does great work. I do. Let me see who else. Tess Clark has been putting out great videos. Electric Universe Eyes. Kronos. Who else? Yeah, I don't know. I watched a lot today, so it was great. Yeah, I mean, I think all these videos that I was watching I had comments on ultimately. I think from a standpoint of this idea of consciousness and how it all relates, and you know, having problems with things versus having no problems with things. And a lot of these conversations ultimately, even though, you know, inherently this plasma cosmology or this electric universe or just everything, the connected universe, resonance universe, there's still kind of these notes of where we're at right now is really terrible. This kind of catastrophism idea. And it's interesting to me how that kind of is a through line through a lot of these different conversations where people are a bit sad about the state of affairs. But I think we're actually coming out of it a little bit. It might not happen in our lifetime necessarily, but you can really see the groundswell because it's undeniable when you look at the photographs and the videos of space that this is how it's all really fully connected. But you know, old dogmatic principles die hard and die long. So we'll see. Trying to do my little part over the past few years. I feel like watching a lot of these videos that maybe I haven't done more to kind of grow the channel, but then I was thinking that I can only do what I can do and share what I know and not try and like celebritize this work. So just some thoughts at 3 in the morning. Choose a song here. I'm full of concepts, but I need to organize my thoughts a little bit more. put on some electric blood here. I'm going to reset the image because I think it's a little too bright for the earth shine. We'll see some more detail and zoom in.
Don't treat me like a fool. I've been sleeping on the streets for days. Don't treat me so cruel. I've been waiting on the porch for days. Don't treat me like you're cool. I've been waiting on the sea for years. I've been waiting for the secret all along. And you know what brings it? Don't you know what soul can sing? Singing about this dream so long for you. I've been dreaming about the song. So long for you, I've been singing about the song. So long for you, I've been dreaming about the one with you. I've been singing about this dream. So long for you, till I see the color of your eyes reflected in the missing picture I made for you. All along, and you know what brings it, and you know what soul can sing. But you know what brings it, and you know what soul can. We gotta go, but it's what brings it out, and you know what soul can sing. Got an electric light, what brings it out, and you know what soul can. Hopping in for a second here, say what's up to Manos, welcome. So yeah, let's zoom in a little bit. Crispy shot, and this is actually one of my favorite phases, where I think we're about 29%. But zoomed in here to the left side of Mare Imbrium, we got Sinus Iridum in view, with this awesome relief shadow of the filament kind of connecting the top of Sinus Iridum all the way down through Mare Imbrium. I'll point out all the regions right here. I'm getting my paint program set up. Let's see if that works. No? Where are you at? Yellow. Yellow is the color. Okay. There we go. Right, so Mare Imbrium, MI, and then we got Sinus Iridum, the Bay of Rainbows, and this is one of the coolest times to view it, one of the best phases to view it at because of the angle. You kind of see the angular sides of it, the kind of half a hexagon. You got crater on the rim of the Mare, or the, what is a Sinus Iridum, right? It's kind of an inlet. It almost looks like half a crater, but it's filled with Mare basalt. And so let's follow this filament. You see this filament's really interesting because you have craters along the filament. Whoops. Like I said, tracking is a tiny bit funky tonight, even though the controller is far more responsive. Follow it down, the crater. And then right here we got Copernicus. That's the crater that is looking so nice. Hexagonal craters, as I was reading all the stuff today, Yeah, I know what I want to mention. I know Gareth Samuel doing See the Pattern channel, and I've talked about Gareth in the past. He does such amazing work. Sometimes it's very dense, and it's kind of difficult to follow along. But he's, you know, quite a brain. But he did this video recently about electric scarification, and did a lot of great examples, and the video is pretty thorough. So it's on the See the Pattern channel. But I feel like he could have touched a little bit more on the hexagonal nature of the craters and how and why hexagons form and pentagons form. Ultimately being because of the boundary layers between spherical expansion. But yeah, really wonderful kind of connectivity tonight. These are the Apennine mountain range still trickling through. Let me erase this and go down a bit more. One of my favorite features, Aristarchus. Exactly, Nicholas Copernicus, heliocentric system. Well, was that really what it is? Let's see. Or was it the geocentric system? Copernicus was a Renaissance polymath, active as a mathematician, astronomer, and Catholic canon, who formulated a model of the universe that placed the sun, rather than the Earth, at its center. Okay. Reading. I guess it is heliocentrism. Okay. I stand learned. Or I sit. I sit corrected. Well, bringing it to the future. Hey, what's going on? More Jello? What's going on? Yeah, so the idea of relativistic frame of reference. So from the standpoint of the Earth, things revolve around the Earth. From the standpoint of the Sun, things revolve around the Sun. From the standpoint of an electron, things revolve around the electron. That's the more thorough understanding, in my opinion. So now we kind of are almost there, but we still have this idea that humans are different than planets and humans are different than quantum spaces. I think a point that I also noticed that people weren't really talking about is the fact that I mentioned in my last video about how everything is aware, is self-aware, and Dr. Ayad left me a nice comment that I wanted to respond to, just about like how we define awareness, which I agree can be defined in different terms, in terms of, you know, complex awareness versus passive awareness. However, I think that the only really possible answer as to how things self-organize, so to speak, is that things have to be aware in a complete holistic way at every size. At every tiny unit, every Planck unit, if you zoomed in further, you would get particles, and then you zoomed in further, you get waves, and if you zoomed in further, you get particles, zoomed in further, you get waves. And if you zoom out into the universe, same thing, it keeps expanding in every direction. And so there are layers to it where, for example, the dyslexic artist talks about co-creating reality and storing the previous memory as a symmetrical process, the dipole moment. And Wal Thornhill, talking to the podcast, was also talking about dipoles, but couldn't really define charge. And I saw a Shockwave in there throwing his 2 cents in about charge. But to follow through, then there's this guy, I think it was the Nassim Haramein Resonance channel. No, what was it? It was Michael Levinson, maybe, talking about sound consciousness and, no, what was he talking about? Essentially, he started to talk about what I think is true, which is the fact that even electrons likely inside have a self and other, a core and a shell. And if you keep going smaller and smaller and smaller, everything has this self and other. But what they weren't talking about is the fact that consciousness must be self interacting with other. And as self interacts with other, core and shell, it creates these layers that are stored as past, remembers them, makes a new layer that is co-creating the present moment. And future doesn't really exist. We don't move into the future. The future happens as we vector through space in this holographic sonoluminescent universe. There are a lot of great topics that I stumbled across today, a lot of stuff that I've talked about I feel like kind of validated me, and a lot of things that I felt like I could add to. But yeah, it's a fun day. Yo, sexy moon, fantasy ecstasy, it's going on. Sebas HCG, hello mon cher ami, long time not seen, same, welcome. Ça va? Tout va bien ici. A little bit sleepy, but looking great right now on the moon. Right, so like I said, 30% waning crescent moon, and I was showing Sinus Iridum, Mare Imbrium. Top right, we got Copernicus looking great right along the terminator, and then Aristarchus is looking very bright here. Let me sketch on top of it a little bit, show our little Aristarchus plateau, our diamond formation with Aristarchus crater right at the corner at a vertice. You got Herodotus and you got Schroeder's Valley, the split Lichtenberg channel, or sinuous rill, or electric arcing discharge. And then you have Kepler with its like radiating arcs, filaments. But what I like about Kepler here is that there's kind of underlying diamond shape to it. It's hard to see it right now because of the brightness and the relief, but I feel like it kind of is a mirror to Aristarchus. These diamonds shaping outwards, ultimately I think are formed because of these electrical crystal. That's why it looks like a crystal, because crystals form these lattices, and you can kind of see it almost looks like this elongated crystal it's not really a hexagon, it's almost a hexagon. Then of course you have the center, and really what it is that it's along a filamentary coaxial Birkeland current, and then you have nodes, and these nodes are where these craters are. Right here, Aristarchus has kind of a mirror to it right here. Also cool is that Copernicus, Aristarchus, and Kepler form a right angle triangle, Pythagorean triangle. And this is also another great relic that I think, I would want to clarify though, I feel like regardless of whether the moon was impacted or scarred electrically, I feel that the structures left behind would indicate that both types of events are electrical in nature, right? So if impact craters can create Lichtenberg filaments, then impact-related events are electrical events because they basically emit and spew ejecta along the natural magnetic flow. So I feel like there's this kind of argument about which it is. To me, it's just the idea of electrical arcing between planets is a much more logical, rational way of thinking as opposed to this, placing these events like the late heavy bombardment at a certain period in the past and saying, that's it, that's how it was done, and not entertaining any other ideas. Here's an interesting concept that we can look at. I want to make sure, I think it's Nectaris. Nectaris, and then Gassendi, and Gassendi A. You can see it's a crater along the rim of a mare, or a larger crater, with its tiny crater on the rim of it. And this idea, again, this diamond ring idea, is that things form along the most, the points of least resistance, but that's not really why that happens. What's really happening is that these shapes emanate from a nodal point, and these nodal points kind of have these expanded structures. So this essentially has a mirrored structure right here, and then you have the Markland filament running through. It's our apple core all over again. I know I'm not being super articulate. I got a lot of thoughts in the membrane tonight, insane in the membrane, but this is essentially what I see when I look at these features. It seems very obvious to me that electrical impact or electrical scarification or impact, regardless, creates the same geometry. So intrinsically, inherently, electricity and electromagnetic field lines are inherent in everything at every scale. It also kind of makes you really think about how like an impact could create a feature like this, where you have clear sides to it. This even, like, it looks circular, but really if you can follow these angles, you'll see it ends up being kind of dodecahedral. There is a lot of erosion, of course, that happens, and walls break, and primitive geometry ends up having a lot of sides, right? So you can have 12-sided primitive objects that end up kind of looking smooth, because the more points you have, the more lines you have around the edge, the more you can kind of make a circle. But if you reduce the number of vertices on a circle, you end up with hexagons and pentagons. What else we got tonight? A little bit more. We got, I think it's Chickered Crater, this really wonderful elongated shape here. This is kind of one of those shapes which is inversely anomalous, because this is what you would imagine impact craters to look like, these very stretched marks where impacts would be coming in at all angles, and it would be quite random and erratic. You would get kind of streaked craters as opposed to these hexagonal, more primitive geometry shaped craters. However, and you have very few of these elongated craters. Now, granted, we're looking at the very end of a sphere, and therefore even Schiller right here is being elongated to our view even more so. But definitely interesting to look at. I don't completely discount the idea that the moon was impacted at certain periods, but I feel like it's not really just the moon, right? It's all comets, it's all asteroids, it's all meteors, it's all planets. Absolutely every planet has similar features. So large circles, smaller circles, this idea of circle packing just exists everywhere. And it's too coincidental to imagine that you have just impacts over all these different planets and comets and asteroids and meteors and stars, and not stars, sorry, but just all the rocky bodies in space have the similar types of features, and especially like Mars and Valles Marineris or Ceres. If you look at Ceres, the small, like, dwarf planet, looks a lot like the surface of the moon. And then, you know, people kind of allude to the fact that on the far side of the moon, on the back side that we don't really see, this, what's the basin called? There's this huge area, the Aitken Basin. But you wonder, like, where is, like, the size of these so-called impacts? You know, there's really no remnant of the impactor. And the size of some of these holes, like the Aitken Basin, would absolutely rip the moon apart, given this kind of porosity of the soil and of the construct of the moon. Similarly, the creation of the moon being from a rock that smashed into Earth and created a bunch of rubble that ended up being the moon is also kind of a wacky story, versus the idea that the moon might have just grown from a small circle to a large, from a small sphere to a large sphere. And people don't question this about Earth either. What does anyone imagine the origin of Earth? Like, did Earth just appear as a giant sphere, or was Earth a smaller sphere that ended up being the size that it is today? It's a hard question to really ponder, given how much propaganda we have about how the Earth is just the way it's been for a very long time and that's it. But things grow in this universe. Things start at a point, grow very large, then shrink again. And so how large was the Earth? How large was the Moon? And Saturn and Jupiter? Everything had to start at some point. And to just finish up the thought about everything starting, I was watching Dissident Science, who typically David D. Hilster and Alexander Unzicker, there's a strong proponent, and I'm with them about, destroying the myth of Big Bang cosmology, or just the event of the Big Bang. But if you were to be really reasonable about it, and we take into account the idea of quantum mechanics, where they describe two membranes smashing into each other and creating little sparks, and one of those sparks might have been the Big Bang. You can kind of imagine that potentially these membranes are actually the layers of the plasma shells, and then the concept actually makes more sense. I think now the way they imagine it is this cosmic inflation idea, and the Big Bang being a point with nothingness, but that nothingness emanated from somethingness. So the universe becomes infinite and up and down scalarly, fractally, but we retain an event potentially like the Big Bang, where two membranes of the layers actually hit each other and created the instantiation dipole moment of our entire universe. And it wouldn't be out of the question. So it's interesting that even in plasma cosmology, when people are talking about it, there's this very strong bent on like tearing down the old pillars, and I'm with that. But Big Bang as an event reinterpreted, might have existed, And the thing is, same thing with black holes. Black holes, as they stand with the contemporary rationale and pop science interpretation, or at least what's publicly presented, really doesn't make a lot of sense, because they defy their own existence. But when you look at Ken Wheeler talk about counter space and sinks between two magnets that create null zones, where the two objects are drawn towards a null zone in counter space, null zones could be these black holes. So, and it doesn't mean light can't escape, it just means that you have a counter space sink that recycles light. And that's how the idea of, black holes, we're going to destroy everything, infinitely dense, light can't escape, and now we're in a place where there are different types of black holes, and maybe some light can escape. So it would make a lot more sense that the idea of two objects acting against one another actually create this incommensurability, where like space there's no place for magnetism to exist. It doesn't go to zero, but it goes to as low as it possibly can go, and therefore sucks in all matter and spits out matter. It becomes almost a huge funnel in space. And I think maybe that's what they allude to as a black hole. If you continue that thought, potentially that funnel is the center core of an electron. Potentially, if you could maybe zoom into an electron, see inside it, maybe its nucleus is this kind of funnel, that incompressible moment of our existence where things have to be sucked in and spit out, as opposed to having a nucleus. So there could be this kind of space, but I actually feel like there must be recursively fractal all the way up and down. Yo, what's going on, Donald Yates? How's it going? And Copper Trops, what's happening? Yeah, I'm just chatting here a little bit. Let's see, the bull face. Where are you seeing the bull face? I'm sure it's there, but are you talking about above sinus iridum over here? Those are some eyes and a nose. That could be a bull or a dog. Or is it lower on the screen? Let's keep going down. Then we got a little crab shape over here. Why are crabs shaped this way? Same reason, right? Crabs are shaped with electricity. They're grown along filaments, and their eyes appear as a symmetrical cross-section of our Birkeland filament. And their legs extend in the same way, you know. All creatures are grown along Birkeland currents. And I also, yeah, I know a term I wanted to mention is Markland Convection, right? So I talk about the counter space impinging, or I talk about matter coalescing around Birkeland filaments, but they call it Markland Convection, where matter is pulled and condensed around the Birkeland filament. That's why we see these points of energy, or these points of reality, or these points of convection or articulation, because along the Birkeland filament there's the most attraction, then it dissipates outwards, and that's how we create these rings. Depending on the resonance and the frequency of this is how you have the variancy of our reality. From planets to humans, you have scalar variance and you have harmonic variance. And so each of these is also creating elemental structure. Each of these is also creating its own gravity well. Each of these creating its own awareness, consciousness with field. And I think this is kind of one of these things that the whole idea of consciousness, reality, is self and other. Interaction with self and other. That's consciousness. And self and other can be nucleus and shells, right? It can be person and the world, you know, it can be a star and the entire etheric field. Self and other in resonance, in different harmonic resonance, imprinting a symmetrical formation upon reality from the frame of reference. So frame of reference in, actually no, frame of reference is sending out a signal into the field. This additive layer creates the next layer, and the next layer, and the next layer, and these layers push out. And symmetrically, you're also creating the past by imprinting these layers too. So the past is now here when the past was here. So same thing I was saying, the Earth being a point, this was the Earth's birth. Now the Earth is this big, and so the Earth's birth is like here. All right, I'm scribbling a lot. Let's clear this up. Let's clear it up. New file, gonna save. Sorry if y'all are hearing the hum in the background. I really need the fan on. It's so damn hot. So let's keep scrolling down, check out, let's see if I can find that bull. Said we got Copernicus. And Copernicus, you can see, again, hexagon, pretty obvious, but let me sketch it. Especially on this outside. So why hexagons? Because spheres, circles expand omnidirectionally, and ultimately spheres hit other spheres, and those push up against each other because they're both expanding, and then you have what looks like a straight boundary layer between the two. That's how you end up getting this geometry. Let's see, what other features can we look at? I think I might have to adjust the
aperture and shutter here. Also, let's take a look at Earthshine again, because I've been missing that. Alright, pick a tune for us. Thanks for hanging out, Space Fam. 4 a.m. Still got some energy here, so we'll go till maybe 4:20, 4:30. Oops. It's a little loud, sorry. So that was a good idea. Our Earthshine moon is looking fantastic. You can see at the top we got Mare Crisium right here. Mare Sea of Crises. And then you got Mare Fecunditatis, the Sea of Fecundity or Fertility. And then you have Sea of Serenity and Sea of Tranquility. And I think this is... was this Nectaris? Yeah, the other one was Humorum. I made a mistake, but yeah. And Mare Imbrium over here. And you can see this formation, and I feel like this should be talked about more on some of these shows. If anybody leaves comments, please point to it, the relationship between Sea of Serenity and Sea of Tranquility being very obviously a pentagon against a hexagon formation. And this is how molecules look, and these are how crystal lattices look. And it's also how you have this kind of slight imbalance between the two halves of a toroidal structure around a Birkeland column or Birkeland current with the node right here at the center. You have the same kind of relationship between Sea of Tranquility and Sea of Crises. So Sea of Crises right here, hypotrochoid, hyperboloid, and torus. So fully connected lunar geology. It's one of those very consistent things. And anyone can do it. If you take a picture of the moon, you can kind of draw these angles. You can see that that's not just me. But it is one of these things that is so fascinating that people continue to call these craters circular.
craters and mare, of course, Maria. So, yeah, but just on a completely different note, how freaking amazing is our moon? About 70% of it on Earth shine right now. I see AAA in the chat. It says any 4K UFOs from that window facing east. Like I mentioned, it's been a while since I've actually captured any transits. I did state my case at a month ago about how I'm almost certainly for sure at this point that all UFOs since the beginning of time are from Earth. And maybe I'm wrong. One day I'll be proven wrong, but I'm pretty sure that it's all been human-created UFOs. And you know, the creatures could have been, you know, people dressed up or people acting or robots or whatever, but from the cattle mutilations, from the Phoenix Lights, to the Rendlesham incident, to the Brazilian stuff, to all the videos, to all the Stephen Greer stuff, pretty certain that it is just electric universe, plasma cosmology technology, and it's been our people all along. So it kind of doesn't change the fact that we see UFOs all the time, right? It really means that we can make UFOs and that people capturing them should, or at least I've changed my perspective on imagining that they're from another solar system and starting to just realize that no, humans are capable of creating UFOs is the more amazing thing. Genghis, I was watching the Pulse concert recently where they did Shine on You because I was actually listening to Us and Them and the great Gig in the Sky where you have, what's her name? There's this woman who sings, I think her name is Sam something, on the '94 Pink Floyd tour, and she does a version of the great Gig in the Sky where that used to be Claire Torrey's part, and she does this absolutely banging version of it. So I was watching that, and then I ended up watching Shine on You, and I realized that I just grew up with that DVD. I just played it over and over and over. That entire concert, the sound production, choice of songs, everybody's playing at like peak capacity. Roger Waters has a couple of DVDs like that, but nothing. I mean, Pulse is kind of on an absolutely crazy level because of course you have Nick, and you have Nick Mason and David Wright on keys. Is it David Wright? No, Rick Wright. Rick Wright and Nick Mason. Yeah. So you still have them, the original members, and Gilmour is just killing it, and of course they do High Hopes, and High Hopes is fantastic, but that version of Shine on You is actually quite amazing. Quite amazing. Yeah, so like I was saying, you can check out my playlist of the 20 best captures, and that I have thrown in, you know, like the ISS going across the moon, which I've seen on a lot of UFO channels where they show this actual, it's a very specific look when you see the ISS going across the moon, and that's always misinterpreted as a UFO, and I really don't think it's a UFO. I'm almost certain that there are space stations that can orbit the Earth in 100 to 300 mile zone above the above the ground. So in this area, this 200 mile up area, you can basically create what I believe is kind of a null zone between two plasma double layer. Well, I guess it's it's like sandwiched inside a plasma double layer around the Earth, and this is what they call the null zone, where craft can basically orbit. And then the Lagrange point, I imagine, is another null zone between an outer magnetic sheath layer, another plasma double layer. So our satellites, and so let's think about it. Now UFOs operate on this omnidirectional reverse gravity, so basically creating a craft that is toroidal, that is, I guess, inverting the flow of gravity from every direction omnidirectionally from this torus. and the person operating the craft, or the robot, is sitting in the center of the donut. And this is how these UFOs, that's why UFOs look like saucers or discs. Ken Wheeler, bless his heart, explains this in a lot of detail, more scientifically than I would, but makes a lot of sense to pretty much anyone who, once you envision it and imagine it and realize that this is the type of stuff that our scientists were working on for years, from Nikola Tesla backwards and forwards. Around that time, there wasn't, I guess there was a lot of witch hunting and book burning, but we still had some real great minds still who wanted to find the real science behind things as opposed to become celebrity scientists. Now we pretty much only have celebrity scientists. Well, that's kind of cynical. Like I said at the top of the show, as I was putting together the list of all the great YouTube channels and contemporary physicists who talk about plasma cosmology and the past 100 years of people like Halton Arp and Eric Lerner and Eric Dollard and a lot of other ones, I think, like the primer fields are kind of amazing, and you have I always forget the primer fields guy, but people don't mention the primer fields at all, the primer fields, but he's done all the stuff with the magnetic kind of coils and flows, and the same stuff that Dan Winter talks about in terms of like the tip of the pine cone. And I guess a little late for me, my brain is actually just like not working and putting together the filaments, but that's kind of threading back through. Oh, now I know what I was saying. I was saying I'm pretty cynical to say that there aren't real scientists, because there are. The mainstream is just filled with pop scientists and celebrity scientists, but we do have a nice few hundred good people thinking about the new wave of physics and astronomy, and it's actually really great. It's inspiring. At the bottom, those are just a couple of stars, Donald. Thanks, AAA Triple B. I always love doing this show. It's good to kind of step away and learn a lot of things, so I can bring some good debate, good topics to the conversation. Sometimes I feel like I'm repeating myself, but recently I've had almost too many thoughts to share. So I'm trying to consolidate finally and put together a presentation that, we'll see how long it takes me to do it. But shareable waves, what's going on, Discog? How's it going? Yeah, I see that, what you're talking about. It's just a star. It's blinking a little red, but I think it's just due to the atmospherics right now. Now, granted, there's a whole topic about redshift, and I saw a lot of videos related to redshift and how people in the comments actually had a lot of thoughts on redshift, but Halton Arp is just this amazing character with so little footage, and if you type in Halton Arp, Haltonarp, you'll find a few documentaries associated with his work, and there is one that actually includes Anthony Peratt and Eric Lerner, and it's the one I was referencing where they were tearing down the Big Bang. And like I said, as I was listening to it, I was thinking, like, there's room to really discuss all these topics a little more broadly. However, that documentary is quite great, and I think it's from about 10 or 12 years ago, and Halton Arp is dead now, but his idea, just in the most simplistic terms, is that redshift is a measure of the radiation, and as the stars or the galaxies cool off as they're born, they tend towards emitting the blue light versus red light, but they are all connected via electrical filaments. Now, age or intensity of oscillation versus distance is an excellent debate to have. I think at some point we're going to get to this. Well, we're going to get to the conclusion at some point, but it makes a lot more sense to engage all the possibilities here as opposed to sticking to the fact that redshift is what scientists contemporarily say it is, which is this result of an expanding universe. And so just if we put that aside for one moment and we can consider the alternative, which is that redshift is a measure of age or a measure of, I guess, emanation of... Somebody made a great comment. I think I was really stuck on this idea of age because it's the most simplistic, and Halton ARP was really keen on it. But I think, what was somebody talking about? They were talking about just oscillation rates and the fact that certain types of light oscillate in a certain way, and that's what we end up perceiving from these different quasars and galaxies. I don't think I'm explaining it very well, but I think this topic is definitely something that people can understand, and there are alternative theories to the fact that redshift is this measure of distance in space. And as I was also watching, you come across this idea of astronomical units or light years. And I think that's one of those things, again, the premise of that is just so funny that, a light year is, I think, what, like 4 trillion or 16 trillion miles? But the fact that scientists just decided at some point that, like, it's so far away, we're just going to say it's how far light travels in 1 year. So you're basically taking the idea of a year, which is also not a constant, and you're taking the speed of light, which is also not a constant. You're taking a year, which is not a constant, speed of light, which is also not a constant, and then you're saying here's a constant. And it's such a weird thing to apply this idea. Well, it's something like 10 light years across, or it's like 50,000 light years across. And I'm like, what are you imagining when you say that? You have to take into account light traveling, which it doesn't. You have to take into account that, or you have to assume, that light travels, which it doesn't, that light travels linearly, which it doesn't, that there is a limit to it, which there isn't, and that that a year, which is 365 and point something days, in the perspective of a human, based on our observation of the moon and the sun, or the observation of the sun, let's say, these are very broad assumptions that are completely from the perspective of humans on Earth. Then applying these distances to space and saying, yep, that's 1 light year across, is just the strangest premise and strangest number of assumptions to take. Yo, Benomaly. It's been a while, bro. How's it going? Quality. Hope you're doing great. How's the music coming along? So yeah, I'm loving this lunar view right here. Maybe I'll switch back to our Crescent in a second, but yeah, so I was just ranting a little bit about light years and astronomical units, just basically taking human perspective, which I think is very grand and broad, but to just imply and assume these limitations and these laws of the universe and say, yep, that's how long it is, that's how far it is, it just makes you really question why they would do something like that. And I think, again, it's a lot of fancy talk. Tons of concepts end up not tricking people, but get sold to people with poetic language and great imagery. And so I think that's where we're at. We're like, oh, it's great, it's 10 light years, 10 trillion light years. And then people just say, hey, I can't even, my brain shuts down, I just can't even comprehend those types of distances, and therefore doesn't look any further into the topic. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how it feels sometimes. But then when you really, hey, thanks, Ben, I appreciate it. It's a good point that you bring up about Bandcamp. Unfortunately, they want all these different music sites now want tax information, which is really annoying. Everybody's been so kind to buy some of my tunes on Bandcamp, but I think I might look for another means of providing records for people. But I appreciate your comment, and I hope your tunes are doing well. I always see you on my SoundCloud, kind of just pop up here and there. It's great to see you pop into the chat here. So yeah, let's flip over the moon. Let's play a jam here. Something new maybe that you haven't heard, Ben. What do we got?
Let's do... Yeah, please let me know what you think of my thoughts. Just about, like, I mean, light years, of course, but also, like, the assumption about redshift, and if you've heard of Halton art. I've linked to him in the past, but it's just so fascinating how this guy did incredible research, and they literally, like, banned his telescope time, and there are, like, 5 videos of him in 2022. It's just absolutely crazy. Yeah, even TuneCore, Genghis, they want tax information. I've barely sold any music, but it's kind of annoying. They're using third-party systems. It's, I don't know, I'd love to just be able to keep my stuff, you know, free almost. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe I'll just make all the Bandcamp audio free for people, and then people, if they want to donate to the channel, they can just directly PayPal. But yeah, I don't really need any money. I'm doing this for the love of it, and everybody, all the kind comments about the music is more than enough for me. I wanted to play Stretch Ghosts, but where is it? There we go. This is one of my new ones.
each other. Bring this rain in, find us, find your light. Bring us to bring them to the side. I used to dream them from inside. I used to bring your love for our life. Like breeze upon the water. Alright, those were a couple of jammy jams. There were Stretch Ghosts, and then the other one was Astute Rebellion, the reggae-inspired one, and then Nimble Numbness was that last one. All some demos from this year. Just having some fun lately, not too stressed about finishing songs, just getting out ideas that are vibey and will sound good on the show. So yeah, I was messing around with the contrast here like I usually do, and typically I can just flip the contrast all the way and it'll make a white background and a dark moon, but who knows what happened. I updated OBS finally, so OBS. Dad joke. Alright. Still looking gorgeous. 30% waning crescent moon. It's so funny how Aristarchus looks at this phase. It almost looks like it's projected outwards, like it's protruding versus like it's inset. Sinus Iridum always looking great, and Copernicus is that large one you can see right at the terminator. Fantastic. Thank you so much for the kind words about the music, y'all. Thanks, Ben. Hurricane? Yeah, I can do some Hurricane here. Huracan. This one I've been really meaning to go back to because I feel like I could do some more on it, but I never do. Is this the right one? Yeah. No way. For the ones you left, and I crawl up beside you, fly. You're my hurricane. No sleep when I lost you. No sleep when I lost you. You're my hurricane.
I love that end. It's so abrupt. I'm like, what chord is this? Yeah, I feel like I can mix that a little bit better. Some of my tracks, I'm like, oh, I could do a lot better, and some I'm just like, I'm gonna leave them. I think maybe we'll play some Willpowered up next, because I have a ton of energy for 4:30 a.m. But what I notice is potentially M42 and Orion is coming up to my right, so I'm going to try and like scoot the scope around and get us some M42 before I shut it out for the morning. Should we do some Willpowered in here? Get some dancey vibes. This always makes me feel like Currents.
Do you know why I've been beaten from the heart? I know, no lie. I've been thinking about you all night. Why? No why. I've been waiting for your white light. Thinking that you should be mine. So call me up, and let's get down, down. So call me up, and let's get down, down. Oh, you send me messages across the cosmic network, and you send me pictures from across the astral plane, and you send me cryptic kisses across the matching network. So call me up. Je t'attends, mon amour incertuel, assis dans mon canapé cinéma, agitant la éternelle, avec on son billet. Je suis là même que ton avant l'année chaque jour. Je t'attends, mon amour, avec les mecs sans agrévé. Et c'est mon âme magnétique, c'est l'amour magnétique, c'est mon amour magnifique.
Alright, just jumping back here for a second. So yeah, I think just gonna move over to M42 in a couple. So let me know if there's anything else you want to see on our Luna for this cycle. I doubt I'm gonna stream any more of it for the next week or so. Maybe tomorrow, but probably not. So this will be our last view for this August moon. It's been a fun month. Got a few shows in, at least like 5 or 6. It's good. Do what I can. So yeah, like you can see hexagons all over the moon, craters on the rims of larger craters, smaller craters on the rims of those. Everything is very organized and laser etched into the surface. It's not just the moon, it's comets, it's asteroids, it's meteors, it's Earth, it's other planets, it's Ceres. On and on these scars appear, and it's not difficult to imagine giant cosmic lightning bolts in space because we see them. There are pictures of them right now. So if you look at the James Webb Telescope pictures, those are these filamentary cosmic strands that connect the universe. And when something potentially is being born, like an umbilical cord, for example, is an electrical plasma connector that is cut in the physical material world, but ultimately ends up persisting through the life of the mother and the child
So you have this kind of connected plasma filamentary action at a human scale, you have it at a micron scale, at the Planck scale, and you have it in cosmological scale. And there's really, it's the most rational explanation. Somebody did say it today when I was listening about how everything on the quantum scale up until Earth, I guess, people are like, fine, there's electricity. But anything outside of Earth, no electricity. And it's just this weird way of looking at things. It's akin to the idea that humans are just, we're special, and animals are nothing like us, and trees are not alive or sentient, or tables are not alive, or proteins are not alive. But if you just zoom out a little bit and think about it, just the fact that the entire universe self-assembles. We talk about it, I'm kind of all over the place here, but like, essentially when you listen to people talk about the body, it's like the body does this, and proteins do that, and cells do that, and DNA does that. It's always othering the body, but the body is you. So you're doing it. You're doing the DNA, the building of the eyeballs, the growing of the hair, the cell packing of the skin. You're creating a permittive and a permittivity and a permissivity of your own skin perfectly enough to allow you to live in this world. And so we are doing all those things. The DNA is not operating on its own. Well, that's actually sort of what I'm trying to say. The DNA is acting on its own as a version of us, and we are a version of it. So at a fractal scale, everything in our body, down to the smallest point in our body, must be aware of its own surroundings, its own gravity, its own interaction. And when you model simulations and you really want things to work properly, you actually have to apply this to every particle that is emitted in these three-dimensional simulations. So when you emit particles, the particle has to know what's next to it, what the heat is, what the temperature, what the gravity, the density, and on at every scale of the particle. And therefore it would make sense that particles and quarks and electrons are self-aware. And when I say self-aware, means that there is self and other to be aware of. So awareness, consciousness, arises as a resonance between self and other, or nucleus and shell. And so it's just a very, very simple way of understanding the relationship of consciousness and electricity. Hey, 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 I see Cosmic Surfer. Good morning to you, mate. It's been a long time. Microwave Soda says, God did it. But I'm saying God did it, but we are God. Like an aperture of God, of the God. But it doesn't mean we are lesser than the God, because we are just a fractal interpretation of the God, which means we have all the powers that a God does. Same way a tiny, tiny particle has all the powers that a God does, and a planet has all the powers that a God does. Now, it's not the same powers, but it's the same form of powers. And what I mean by that is that some things are planets, some things are humans, some things are bacteria, right? There's a variance, but inherently, fundamentally, structurally, and operationally, there's electricity and electromagnetic gravitic lines of force. Now these lines are not just there, and light is not just there. Things are manifest, co-created with the resonance in the ether. And what is the ether? People think, there are a lot of different explanations. This Demystify Science podcast was actually talking to Halton, not Halton, I was talking to Thal Warnhill. And Thal Warnhill was asked, what is charge, right? Like electrical charge. And he was also asked, what's the reasoning for interaction at the quantum scale? And he kind of stumbled and fumbled on this. He did say that at every size, things operate the same way, which is very cool, because it's very, you rarely hear Thal Thornhill say this, but he actually very clearly elucidated his idea of fractal recursivity, or basically operational redundancy at every scale. But he didn't really, and none of them really were talking about it today when I was listening to all the different people. They were talking about this resonance with shell. So nucleus and shell resonating is what consciousness is, how consciousness arises. And it's also how gravity is made. And it is also how, when gravity is made, everything is made at that instantiation of the dipole moment. So self and other, two dots relating to one another, is the arising of consciousness. And as consciousness arises from this instantiation, it also grows, or essentially creates an instance of gravity, of density, of temperature, of light, of variance. And that's how, at the very smallest scale, things can self-organize, and then people can self-organize, and planets can organize. The idea that things can organize means they must have an awareness. And where do you draw the line of awareness if you say that, you know, proteins can only fold themselves and they can't watch TV, you know, or people can watch TV, but planets, or whatever, the sun can emit solar flares. So there, if you're aware, then you're aware. So I think at every scale, every possible scale, every single point in this universe is aware of itself in some way. And that's like the most, I think, I mean, it's a hard thing to imagine in a way because it becomes very, very complex. But that must be the way things operate, because the body can do all these things, but every instance of that exists within our body is also doing its own kind of its operations, its day-to-day functions. And so it has its own level of awareness, but it exists within our own awareness. And so fractally recursive, like, there should be no reason why a cell that that splits is any less aware than we are, and vice versa. It's just a different type of awareness. It might be, you might consider it limited from the perspective of the frame of reference of human beings and us having a complex frame of reference. But that's just a perspective on it. The fact is, at that scale, I think I'm bringing a lot of ideas here, but Wal Thornhill was alluding to a negligible amount of something. And when I mentioned it where they talk about the moon, they're like, it's a negligible amount of magnetism, or a negligible amount of this. But even any amount, negligible or not, is an amount, and therefore it exists, right? So I think it's more important to note that it exists rather than to denote how much of it exists. So if the moon has magnetism at all, who cares if in relation to the Earth it has less magnetism or less gravity? It's really just that it has gravity and that it has magnetism, and therefore an entity that exists like a planet or a moon has its own gravity and its own magnetism, or its magnetic field rather. Alright, I'm gonna shut up now. Microwave soda's like STFU, bro, play some tunes. Alright, so say goodnight to our Luna, and I'm gonna go over and show us some nebular clouds up in M42, which I think is a diamond, and it looks a lot like our Birkeland current and our donut. Let's go with some dark runs here.
Can you feel like the way I can feel? I can feel. I can feel like the waves. I can feel. I can feel. I can feel. to be. Let's believe the wonder and the sign we sing. So let the lady bring. We'll never know, we'll ever know. Oh, that's because you're open now, open now. That's because you're open now, open now. That's because you're open now, that's because you're open now, that's because you're older now, older now, old.
That was a fun little transit. So I was scribbling and you all saw that. Not sure what that was. It's really fast. Could have been a satellites typically move slower, but we are zoomed in on M42 here, the Orion Nebula. Yeah, satellite or shooting star. It might have been a shooting star, but I mean, it was moving, looked like it, I have to replay it. Was it moving upwards in frame? I'm not sure. If it was moving upwards, then it was probably a craft or like a satellite. It was moving, I don't know. Could have been a shooting star, but very cool. Yeah, so I was just sketching some filamentary action as I see it. So if we're kind of, what's interesting is I think we're looking at it top down. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. Turn that back on. There we go. So you can't see the nebular cloud, but it actually, this is one curve of it. And you have this kind of protrusion. Look at that, another one. That's pretty cool. Lots of shooting stars. I guess it's getting to be, what is it, almost 5 in the morning. So maybe we're getting, what are these? Are the Taurids? It's probably coming up on a meteor shower, so that's cool. All right, so finish this off. So I feel like if we could see the other side of it, you would see this nebular cloud. I'm certain of it. And then I feel like we have this top-down view of the spiral. So I feel like there's a structure and there's a donut top-down and sideways. And it's a complex image to imagine, but it's basically like these 4 trapezium stars are here. It's like an artery. It's like a cross-section of a, maybe if you cropped a limb, you would see it. So that's the bone, I guess the bone marrow, and the bone encasing, and the skin around it, if you were to look at it like that, like an arm. Right. That's how I imagine our limbs are, trees are, this kind of layered. We're basically seeing the cross-section of a plasma tube around a coaxial Birkeland filament. This is for another show, but really lovely to see it in this kind of detail. Another like part of the, I want to say anomaly, because I see benomaly, but no one really talks about this angle right here on M42, and nebulas in general having these sharp corners, the diamond corners, pentagonal against hexagonal, and it just shows that you have really an emanation that starts off circular and expands omnidirectionally. Again, possibly why people think, or at least we've come to this thing that the universe is expanding, but it seems like everything basically has a small point, a midpoint, a large point, and a small point, and dissipation, where everything explodes and it returns to the ether. So nothingness, instantiation of consciousness, expansion of consciousness, golden age of consciousness, explosion or dissipation or redistribution of consciousness. And this is one harmonic interval, and this is what our life is, I think. And like fruits and trees, and at every scale things operate at a different harmonic variance, so there's different time at every scalar variance. Blue diamond Phillips formation, exactly. You got it. Anyway, just some thoughts about what we're looking at.
lots of other things. Again, what are we looking at? Why is it blue and violet, right? These are the colors, this index of refraction, and the colors that reflect back at us using sensors. But space is filled with filaments and structure, and this wonderful, like, new interpretation of it that I swear today I was very inspired by how many videos I found that were talking about it. I know in the past I was like, oh, no one is talking about things. Oh man, jam and toast and some coffee and tea, whatever it may be. It sounds delicious right now. Definitely worked up the munchies sitting here. So yeah, a couple more songs, and then I'm gonna call it a night, cause why not? I could go all night, but I should get some rest. Yeah, gorgeous M42 and Orion, and a fun waning crescent moon like we haven't seen it in a while. Why do I keep turning that off? Stop. All right, good friends. Genghis, Sebas, Benomaly, Cosmic, Copper Tropicals, Microwaved, Discog, AAA, Donald Yates, Manos, and whoever else was lurking in the background. I appreciate you all very much. Great to ride with you on another space journey together. What is it? Video number 670 or something. But it's even more than that. But yeah, we got to see some space tonight, talked a little bit about things, mostly just rambled a bit. I feel like I wasn't extremely articulate tonight, but just a lot of thoughts going on. And this is how it is when I watch so many videos where I just want to comment on them and I want to shout them out and I want to disagree and I want to propose stuff, but I feel like I made some points, and you can follow up with me by asking me questions in the comments or next show. Definitely feel free to, not feel free, but check out people like Eileen McCusick, Rupert Sheldrake, Halton Arp, and definitely listen to Wal Thornhill's recent video on Thunderbolts Project and his podcast with Demystify Science, because I dig it. Hey, Rainsong 420, how are you? Catching me while I wrap it up here, but so nice to see you. Hope you're doing great. All right, y'all. Maybe I'll come back tomorrow for Jupiter is actually rising earlier and earlier. So if I do have some nice skies, maybe around 11, 12, like midnight tomorrow, we'll cast some Jupiter. Same thing with Saturn. So I need some better view, like better weather conditions for the planets, but something like this. But we'll see. All right, y'all. Time for me to call it a night. The outro. What is the last song? Let's do Dreamfields up in here. Great to see everybody. I'll catch you soon. Captain out.
Sleep. gars.